Good evening. I just wondered what the panel's view was on the budget today and what impact that they think that might have on businesses in Shropshire.
Let's start with Daniel Krawczynski, who was actually present today at the budget. Your views on the budget and the impact you think it's going to have on businesses in Shropshire, positive and negative?
Well, I think the most important thing that we have to bear in mind is that I think it's generally perceived and accepted that the economic situation that we inherited in 2010 was extremely difficult. I'm very proud that after 5 years in office, we now have the fastest growing economy in Europe and in the Western world. And the OECD has increased expectations for growth next year to 2.7%. That hasn't come about as a result by a fluke, but by a great deal of work by the government to ensure that the appropriate measures are taken to help businesses to thrive. My favorite expression in politics is that business is the workhorse that pulls the social welfare cart. And all that government needs to do is to create the right environment for businesses to succeed. And I'm very pleased that corporation tax has been lowered. It's down to 20 pence. It is the lowest corporation tax in the G20, not quite as low as our neighbours Ireland, where corporation tax is 12.5 pence in the pound, but we are getting to that position where we are reducing the burden of taxation and regulation for businesses, and that is very important.
So as far as you're concerned, the impact on businesses in Shrewsbury is going to be positive?
Absolutely. And if I think to myself that interest rates are at a record low, inflation is low, but the most important thing which I'd like to express this evening, and it goes over and over in my mind every day, is that we are still spending £53 billion of your money every year on servicing the national debt. I think that is outrageous and appalling. So much of your hard-earned money pouring out of this country to pay our debts. And I have to say, and I'm going to make my first political point here, the Labour Party, when they were in office, those were the good times. That's when we had a good global economy. They borrowed between 30 and 50 billion pounds a year, every year, from 1997 until they left office. And so we've got to tackle these debts and eliminate them. And the budget today talked about how we have reduced the annual structural deficit from 10% of national income to 5%. And we are on course to run a budget surplus by 2018. I am thrilled about that because I think the country has to live within its means like any household and any company.
Okay, let's move on to Laura Davis, Labour candidate.
Thank you. George Osborne spent an hour today telling people that they are better off under his government. Working people are £1,600 a year worse off under this current government. Our NHS is in crisis, and yet there was no mention about funding for the National Health Service in the budget. Labour will get the deficit down in a fair way. We will invest appropriately in infrastructure to support local businesses, not just in large urban areas of the southeast of England, but everywhere by the formation of regional entrepreneur hubs. We will create a national investment bank whose sole purpose is to invest in small businesses and make it easier for startups. The problem is with the current budget is that it does nothing for working families. And while working families can't thrive, neither can businesses.
And businesses in Shrewsbury are going to be affected positively or negatively by the budget today, Laura?
Well, the budget didn't say anything about future investment, be that in helping startups or an investment in infrastructure and transport links. All we've seen over this Parliament in Shrewsbury are cuts to public transport, cuts to bus services. They are damaging to our local independent businesses, especially in town centres.
Okay, let's move on to Christine Tinker, Liberal from the Liberal Democrats. The budget today, what do you think of it? Positive or negative for Shrewsbury businesses?
I think on the whole, it was positive for Shrewsbury. Obviously, it will never go as far as we would like to go at the moment. But for me, the biggest thing was the business rates being reviewed, because I know that does affect a lot of businesses very personally. My business almost went out of business when the rates were going to be increased. Now, we managed to appeal and stop that happening, but I do appreciate that is a huge problem for lots of businesses in Shrewsbury.
Okay, we're going to come back to the question of business rates a little later on. What else is overall positive and negative?
Overall positive. We have now the strongest economy in the G7 countries. Again, I know there are some businesses who have been adversely affected, but as the income of people is helped by the tax cut, the personal allowance increase for people today, there will be more money in the economy for people to be spending, which should in turn help the businesses.
Okay, Emma Bullard from the Green Party, your thoughts on the budget and how it'll benefit Shrewsbury businesses or not?
I would just like to start with the bigger picture, if that's all right, because I think for the Green Party, one of the most outrageous things was George Osborne giving tax cuts to great big global corporations to operate more North Sea gas and oil extraction, and this is about a week after the leaders of the three main parties said, no, we take climate change seriously, we're all going to act together, and we're really going to take it seriously. We can really mean it this time, we've said we take it seriously so many times. So that was such an opportunity missed, where he could have put money instead into development of renewable energy across the country. That would have benefited everybody, including Shrewsbury. So I want to say that, that really shows kind of what this government thinks of climate change.
And as far as Shrewsbury businesses are concerned, positive, negative?
Well, I didn't hear anything positive, I have to say. George Osborne says we're all in this together. I think that the unemployment rates are not going down in Shropshire, even if they are going down nationally. I think that we need better public services. We need to stop penalising the people at the bottom so that they can participate in the economy, and that will be good for small business locally.
Okay. And Suzanne Evans, UKIP, thoughts on the budget and positive or negative effect on Shrewsbury businesses?
I think it's not going to have much effect on businesses in Shrewsbury at all. I think overall the budget was fairly neutral. There's a tradition, isn't there, that before an election the Chancellor does a great big budget giveaway. And I'm very pleased that George Osborne certainly didn't do that. I think his housekeeping has been quite prudent. But Daniel talked about getting the economy back on track. Let's not forget that the national debt now has doubled since the coalition took power in 2010. It took Labour 13 years to double the national debt. The Conservative-led coalition has done it in 5. So we still have to be very prudent indeed. I would have liked to have seen a lot more for businesses. We've now talking about George Osborne talked he was going to raise another £13 billion from selling off some of the banks that we, the members of the public, bailed out and saved. And whilst again I think it's good he did put that money into paying down the national debt and not just a giveaway, an electioneering giveaway, I would have liked to have seen some of that money going into helping small business startups who are finding it increasingly difficult to get funding. I think we need to put more responsibility, particularly on those publicly owned banks, to now give back to the people of Britain, and one of the ways they could do that is by putting more money into startup investment. Shrewsbury, again, I think one of the things that UKIP wants to do is to roll back that 20% VAT levy that was put on listed buildings, of which we have so many in this beautiful town, and so many of which we have people running businesses from them as well, and that has put the cost of repairing our heritage up considerably. I would have liked to have seen some clawback there on VAT for listed buildings. And finally, I'd like to have seen the personal allowance go up even further. I think it's iniquitous that anyone on minimum wage should pay any tax at all. I really don't think if it's the minimum that people are said to be able to survive on, you shouldn't pay tax on that amount. And again, UKIP would take everyone on minimum wage out of tax and raise the personal allowance to £13,000. It's a shame that George Osborne